Welcome to Theory of Pets. I'm a passionate pet owner with a drive to help others like me uncover the truth about the pet industry and what goes on behind the scenes. We are currently in the middle of a worldwide pandemic that we have never seen before. It is leaving all of us nervous and wondering what's happening next. Most of us have been watching the news and keeping up with current events, trying to figure out what's going on, what's going to be happening in the future, and it's still leaving us with a lot of questions. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there are a lot of things that we just don't know because this is such a new development. We've had a lot of pet owners, of members of our audience, and fans of our website, topdogtips.com, sending us emails and messages asking if dogs can get COVID-19. And we've had some people asking if dogs can get coronavirus too. The first thing that I want to educate all of our listeners about is that coronaviruses are a large family of viruses. It's like the flu and how there are many different strains of the flu. Coronaviruses are a large family of viruses, one of which is the COVID-19 novel coronavirus, which is what's causing the panic and the pandemic that we're in right now. Some of these viruses cause illnesses in people, while others can cause illnesses in certain types of animals. So it's kind of a two-part question. Can dogs get coronavirus? Yes, there are certain strains that dogs can contract and spread, but no, there is no current evidence, and this is according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, there is currently no evidence that shows dogs can spread COVID-19. So yes, they can contract and spread some types of coronaviruses, but it does not seem that COVID-19 is one of those strands. I've done a lot of research about this recently. As I said, I've had so many people asking questions, and I didn't know anything about it either. Obviously, this is something that's new to all of us, so I would really encourage you to do your research before you panic and worry about things for no reason, because sometimes, in this instance, for example, if you're worried about your dog contracting the disease, you don't need to be worried about that. Of course, there are certain precautions that we all still want to take, and I'll get to those in a minute. But to answer the question of can dogs get COVID-19, currently the CDC is telling us that that is not something that they are concerned about at this time. According to the American Veterinary Medical Association, you should not be worried about petting your dog during this time either. Their chief veterinary officer, Gail Golab, said, and this is a direct quote from her, "We're not overly concerned about people contracting COVID-19 through contact with dogs and cats. The virus survives best on smooth surfaces such as countertops and doorknobs. Porous materials such as pet fur tend to absorb and trap pathogens, making it harder to contract them through touch." So if you're worried about your dog contracting the disease or your dog picking it up somewhere and you contracting it from petting them, those are two things that you really don't need to be worried about at this time. There are coronaviruses that infect animals and can spread to humans. Once a human does contract the disease, it spreads from human to human. According to the CDC, this is really rare. Severe acute respiratory syndrome, also known as SARS, which appeared back in 2002. You may remember the pandemic around that as well. That was an example of a coronavirus that started in animals and spread to humans. So it is possible. It has happened, but that's not, or doesn't seem to be the case with COVID-19. They are saying that in the US so far, there are no dogs that have been tested positive for the disease. They have no reason to believe that dogs are able to spread the disease. So those kind of things, we don't need to worry about. Obviously, there is still a lot of caution that needs to be taken for your human and your furry family members. Just because, we don't have any proof of it just yet doesn't mean that, as the disease spreads, possible mutations, things like that, or other strands of the coronavirus, it is possible. So it's definitely something that you still want to take proper precautions. It's just not something that you need to have a lot of stress and anxiety over. Speaking of those things that we can do to be prepared, I've been talking with a lot of pet owners, a lot of experts in the industry about some tips that we can all follow during this trying time to try to stay prepared as best we can. And the first thing I would recommend is definitely just having a good stock of food and essential supplies. I am certainly not talking about hoarding. We are now starting to see the ripple effect of the hoarding that people have been doing over the last couple of weeks. We're seeing that, supplies are running low in certain areas. People that are needing necessary supplies aren't able to get them. So certainly do not go out and hoard. If you use a little bit of common sense, just think about how much you're going to need to get through the next few weeks or a month. Have at least a couple of weeks of supplies, if not a month's worth on hand, but that's certainly not hoarding. It's, probably what you typically have in stock anyway in your house, but, maybe just buy a little bit extra. So things like dog food, just in case, the stores do close down for a short period of time, or you're unable to get the brand that you usually buy for some reason, something like that, keep an extra bag of dog food around, or an extra case of canned dog food if that's what you feed your pet. Maybe if you prepare like homemade meals for your dog, just buy a little bit of extra groceries, make some meals and freeze them in preparation just in case. Consider the fact that you don't want to buy so much that it goes bad before you're able to use it. If you're hoarding and you've got 6 months worth of pet supplies on hand, say for example, cat food or dog food or treats, those are going to expire before you get the chance to use them. So you don't want to buy wastefully. Don't be hasty about it. Just prepare in advance, like I said, for a few weeks, maybe a month. Not a whole lot more than what you would normally have on hand anyway, maybe a couple weeks extra than what you typically keep in hand. And think about other necessary dog supplies as well. For example, if your dog needs medications, maybe you can ask your veterinarian to give you a prescription for 2 months instead of 1 month. Or if your dog takes supplements, just buy an extra bottle. Probably a bottle of supplements lasts you at least a month. So, if you have an extra bottle on hand, you're going to have plenty. Think about things like that. If your pet uses pee pads, anything that you use daily with your dog that's really essential to his well-being and the essential care that you provide for your dog. The other thing that you should do, if you haven't already done so, and this is something that I'm recommending now during these times that we're in, these uncertain times, but it's really something that you should do as soon as you get a dog, and for any emergency that might come up. But you really need to designate an emergency caregiver for your pet. All pet owners should have somebody in the event of an emergency. If you're hospitalized, if you have to travel unexpectedly, something like that, there should always be someone that's kind of your backup to watch your pet in case of an emergency. But if you don't have one, make sure to find one now. If you need to be quarantined, if you need to go to the hospital, if you need to go and help friends or family members that are sick, this is something that is certainly a reality for all of us right now. It could happen at any time. So be sure that you have a designated caregiver, a neighbor, a friend, a family member, somebody preferably that knows your dog and that your dog knows and is comfortable with. In these times, people probably aren't going to want to come and stay at your house to care for your pet. So maybe if there's somewhere that your dog frequently goes, if you have a boarding facility that you work with that they're still open, or if you have a friend or a neighbor or a family member that your dog has been to their house and they're comfortable there, that would be the most obvious person to choose. If not, of course, we're all trying to do the social distancing thing. So, it's not like you can take your dog around visiting right now, but choose someone who is reliable, responsible, and is going to care for your pet the way that you would in the event of an emergency. You should let this person know all about your dog, any necessary information that they're going to know. So things like the feeding schedule, any required medications, your veterinarian's contact information. All of those things are necessary information that's going to help someone take the best care of your pet possible. And in the event that you're sick, ill, hospitalized, you're not going to be needing to reach out and contact this person, call and check in, make sure they know everything. You're going to have that all set to go. If you have the information written down, just in case the caregiver needs to reference it, that'll be much easier. And if there's any supplies that needs to go with your dog, for example, food, medication, anything like that, be sure that you have kind of a little emergency plan in place. So if something happens, you can gather the necessary supplies, maybe make a list in advance so you can just go down, check off the list, pack the things that you need, and you're out the door. You'll also want to consider quarantine and how boring that can be for animals, how difficult it can be for them. Your dog doesn't understand coronavirus and what's going on in the world right now. You might be home from work, your kids are home from school. Everyone seems to be anxious, stressed, nervous for some reason, and your dog doesn't understand any of this. Everything is different for your dog right now, and he doesn't realize why. So he's going to be feeding off of the energy in your home. If people are nervous, anxious, if you've got kids at home that are bouncing off the walls, chomping at the bit to get out and, get back to their daily routine. Obviously, you're probably ready to get out of the house and back to work. You're stressed. Those things are all things that your dog can pick up on. So he is going to be more stressed, more anxious, of course, bored. Everybody's sitting around the house. Your dog parks are closed. If he goes to, say, doggy daycare or, regular trips to the groomers, even outings, if you take him for car rides or, to go get, say, an ice cream or just go for a ride while you're running errands, all of those things are different now. So your things are going to be different for your dog as well. And you really need to make sure that you provide plenty of entertainment, things to stimulate him, keep him, from getting overwhelmed during this time. So, if you're working from home, if you're working 8 to 5, maybe at 7:15, 7:30, spend that 45 minutes, 30 minutes playing with your dog. Take him outside if you're able to do that. Give him some attention for those 30 minutes or 45 minutes before you start your day. And then when you take a break, play with your dog. Give him some attention while you're on your break from work. And, of course, at night when you're done your work day, make sure that you give him plenty of attention because he's not understanding why you're home all day, but you're not able to interact with him whenever he wants you to. You can also provide bones, chews, long-lasting dog toys. Puzzle toys are really great. Those are wonderful. You can order them on Amazon for less than $20. They're very affordable on any budget, and they keep your dog stimulated mentally and physically. They also keep him occupied for a long time. So that's kind of a win-win. Toys like Kongs, something that you can stuff with like peanut butter, or they make those Kong specifically makes like this spray that you put in there. So it's beef or chicken flavored or whatever, and fill the toys. You can freeze them to make them last longer. Anything that you could do to occupy your dog so that he's not just left sitting wondering why everyone's home, why you're not playing with him when you're home, things like that. And it will exhaust him mentally and physically, so he's not as much of a burden to you while you're trying to work. Another tip is to consider your dog's bathroom needs. I live in Maine. We live in a very rural area. Our dogs can still go out in the yard anytime they want to, the same way that they always do. But not everybody has that luxury, and I definitely understand that. If you live in an urban area where you've been housebound, quarantined, you're not able to go out and go for walks or things like that. I know a lot of places are still allowing you to walk dogs and just keep that 6-foot distance rule. But if you live in an area where that's not allowed, or it's just not feasible for you at this time, think about your dog's bathroom needs and how those are going to change. If you're stuck inside, your dog's going to need pee pads or an indoor litter box, something like that, where they can go to the bathroom. And for a dog that's used to going outside, this is going to be very difficult. Your dog is not used to going to the bathroom on a piece of cloth. So, pee pads, things like that, it's just not going to be enticing for him. Not only that, but you've disciplined him, you've trained him, you've taught him not to go in the house. So now you're going to have to retrain and teach him that it's okay to go in the house in this certain area. There are pee pads and indoor litter boxes that have pheromones. You can buy indoor litter boxes that are essentially a piece of grass, a piece of sod in like a plastic container. So it holds the urine or the feces, but it's actual real grass. So it makes your dog sort of think that he's outside. And then there's, as I said, products with pheromones as well that try and attract your dog and make him urinate in that area. So see what you can do to train him on that. If you click the link below this podcast, it will take you to some resources for training your dog to use pee pads or indoor litter boxes. You should also be really cautious of the cleaning products that you're using right now. We're all trying to keep everything sanitized and disinfected. We're trying to kill as many germs as we can and keep everything clean. Typically, I use homemade cleaners in my house. I use a lot of vinegar to clean, and that works really well because it's natural and it's not toxic to my animals or to my children. I can't use that right now. We're using a lot of bleach-based cleaners trying to disinfect everything. Some people are using products like ammonia and that kind of stuff to clean, and those are toxic, very harmful chemicals. Now, if you're using them to wipe down your counters or, clean things that you've touched, doorknobs and things like that, that's fine. But if you're using them places where your dog can access, like for example, if you're cleaning your floors with bleach-based cleaner, your dog is walking on those. The chemicals are getting on his paws. He might be playing with toys or chewing on things that are on the floor. So he's ingesting them that way. If he licks his paws, he can ingest the chemicals that way. You just really need to be very cautious if you are cleaning with those kind of cleaners, which is the best thing you can do right now to keep your house sterile and disinfected. Absolutely, I'm not saying get rid of the cleaners, but just be mindful of it. Don't let your dog walk on wet floors after you've cleaned them. Give it some time to dry and sort of air out in that area before you allow your dog in there. Don't clean his bedding if you're using, bleach or any kind of disinfectant to wash laundry. Just be sure that you're not doing that with your dog's bedding. Again, as I mentioned, the American Veterinary Medical Association is saying that, we really don't need to be worried about the virus living on dogs' fur. That's really highly unlikely that you're going to contract it that way. So just take consideration when you're cleaning and using those products. And finally, I just wanted to share with everybody that you also should be prepared for the possibility of relocation. While this is kind of like a last resort sort of scenario, or a worst case scenario, I guess I should say, if your dog needs to go stay with another caregiver, or if you need to travel and you plan to take your dog with you, say, you have a friend or family member that's ill and they need help during this time, or sometimes, people need to travel to be with family because, we can't buy certain supplies and we can't, have people in our homes. So some people need help and they have to go stay with friends or family member to help during this time. So you need to prepare your pet for travel. Make sure that your dog is ready for that. He needs to have proper identification on his collar, just in case in the event while you're traveling that he would get lost, or while you're staying, with friends or family members, if he gets lost in a place that he's not familiar. You should also have a travel crate, or if you use, a car harness to secure him, to seatbelt him in, whatever you need for him to travel with. And then, as I mentioned, a list of pet supplies that you will need. So just make that quick list. And then if something does happen, again, this is probably worst case scenario, but it's going to make it a lot easier to be prepared if you are ready to go in advance. It's going to be so much easier when the time comes. You can just go down the list, check everything off, throw it in the bag, and you'll be out the door. Your dog will have everything he needs, and you won't have to worry about getting wherever you're going and missing out on something. So I hope that you are all staying safe and healthy. If you have any questions, of course, jump on our website, theoryofpets.com. You can leave any questions there. If you have any ideas for a topic for a future podcast, any questions that you've been wanting answered, you can share those there as well. And again, our sister site, topdogtips.com, there's some great information on there about coronavirus and dogs, COVID-19, how to prepare, facts that you need to know as a pet parent during these times, ways to save money on pet supplies during this time. There's just some really great resources there. So click the link below this podcast or check out our website, and that will take you give you a link to Top Dog Tips as well, so you can check that stuff out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As I said, stay healthy, stay safe, and please reach out to us if you have any questions.